Bridge to Dr. Mbenga. Emergency. Lieutenant Ortegas is injured.
Coming up, an alien consciousness traps Dr. Mbenga and the Enterprise crew in a real-life children's fairy tale.
All hail the king!
And Dr. Mbenga's critically ill daughter goes missing.
Where is Rukia?
She's gone.
We break down this week's episode and reveal the top 3 moments that made this episode of Strange New Worlds peculiar and unexpectedly touching.
All this and more.
Coming up on Energize.
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 We're boldly going into the uncharted regions of the Star Trek universe before James T. Kirk.
You're listening to Energize, a Star Trek Strange New Worlds podcast, your source for in-depth analysis, colorful debate, and exciting discussions about the new adventures of Captain Pike and the Enterprise crew. I'm your host, Anthony McLemore.
And I'm Steve Truitt.
This week, the USS Enterprise becomes stuck in a nebula that is home to an alien consciousness.
Dr. Mbenga and the crew suddenly and unwittingly become characters straight from the pages from one of Dr. Mbenga's daughter's children's books.
Is there a connection with Dr. Mbenga's terminally ill daughter and the alien consciousness?
Here's a warp speed recap of Strange New Worlds, Episode 8, The Elysian Kingdom.
All hail the king!
Is this some kind of a joke, Captain? Hammer, am I glad to see you?
Are we the only 2 crew members who are unaffected?
It would appear so.
When I scan the nebula, I find evidence of a single life form, including brain activity, and yet there is no sign of a physical body. You must not take the child.
I need you to stop this fantasy. You're putting my crew in danger.
The needs of your crew are inconsequential. You must protect the child. If I leave, the child will die.
So I think, Anthony, we both admit that after watching the preview last week, we started to go, oh boy, here it is. And I think you even said, oh, this is the episode where they weren't going to spend any money.
Oh yeah, this is the episode where they've completely run out of budget. They have to save up for episodes 9 and 10 because usually the last 2 episodes of a season are a 2-parter. So you got to put all your budget into the special effects and everything that's going to go into that particular episode. So I was like, okay. After I saw the teaser, I was completely just like, what is this? What is this? What is this? They finally did it. They finally did it. They finally dressed the ship up.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just
budget,
like, okay.
Yeah, they didn't even bother like building a kingdom set and all that stuff. You're right. It's crazy, but it made sense. It actually made sense the way they made it make sense. But if it is a budgetary question, then yeah, draping the bridge with and putting fake vines all over engineering is, it's kind of weak.
Chief Medical Officer's personal log. Stardate 2341.6. The patient's condition has not improved. She has so little time left.
I was happy to see that this would be an Mbenga story. I liked what they did when they set him up in the beginning with his daughter. And that's where we open up. He's reading her a story. You know, he's read it to her a million times. She's there sitting in her seat. She's just been, materialized from the buffer. Her name is Rukia. And I like that he reads her real handheld books. I think that's a charming piece to this story.
Daddy, finish the story.
You need to go back in, Rukia.
Just finish it with me. Please.
That is a nice touch. And I think the broader point that I've really enjoyed the most is that you have a very dedicated father. And as you and I are dads, we can relate to that in so many ways. When you have a sick child, and in his case, a terminally ill child that he's fighting just to keep alive. And that's, I've really enjoyed that storyline. I've really enjoyed seeing him put his heart and soul into it, into trying to find a cure, trying to save her, even though it's putting his duties as the chief medical officer on the Enterprise in jeopardy.
Yeah, and I was wondering how that would happen. And you and I were trying to figure out, is this why there's a McCoy in the Kirk Enterprise and not a Dr. Mbenga? What happens? Is he demoted? What goes on there?
And now King Gridley was gravely outnumbered.
I hate this part.
But you wanted me to read it to you.
I know. It's just, I always wish the Huntress would come along and help.
Here he is reading this story, and his daughter's asking, I don't like this ending. Why can't it be changed? And he's like, well, this is what the story is. And she's like, why not? Why can't we change the story? Why can't there be a different ending?
What he tells her is that, at least with this story about this kingdom, that the point is that a choice has to be made.
Yeah, boy, do we figure that out later. Exactly. He says this is the story, and it's important that this king has to make a choice. And then it's, time to go back into the pattern buffer. But you get a sense here, this time, something's going to change. Something's going to be different. We're episode 8. There's going to be some kind of change to this story between the two of them.
Definitely. I mean, we've been building up to this the whole entire season. But coming off of that, her wanting to change the ending, and you can tell that maybe there's a part of her that realizes that she's missing time. I mean, I think she knows she's missing time, but I think that I got a sense that maybe she's tired of it. I know he's tired of it. And so it just sent him on a tizzy to try to, figure out a cure. And it drove him into this obsession that he was neglecting his duties.
Doctor, the shuttle crew landed several hours ago. Is there a reason they haven't been cleared for active duty yet?
I'm sorry. I must have gotten a little lost in my research.
Number 1 had to show up down in the medical bay to remind him that there was something that needed to be done. The shuttle crew was coming back, and they needed to be, as anybody coming back from an away mission, needs to be medically cleared to be on the ship. And I think what I really liked about how Number 1 approached it, she's always going to be empathetic. And she put that first and foremost before reminding him that he was neglecting his duties, basically, and that he has a responsibility.
I sympathize with your duties as a father, but I also have to remind you of your duties as our chief medical officer.
Understood, Commander.
Yeah, and they've had this, I like their relationship. I wrote this note particularly that Una and Mbenga have this, they have a secret together. She knows about Rukia, his daughter, and hasn't said anything about it. But before she comes down, he's like, you know what, maybe I can find one more thing. And he's in his little shop there. And again, what I like about this show is there's so much retro going on. It's almost steampunk in a way, because they're like, they're showing a book. They're using the old communicators, the old phasers. And here he is in his lab mixing powders and chemicals. And it's not the woo, it's like real medicine. And I find that fascinating. And of course, right in the middle of it, it explodes in his face, literally.
And then a nice little force field to remind you that we're in the 23rd century.
Right, exactly. It's like contained, but not before it gets into his brain. And you wonder, what's going on here?
You can see to the landing party when you're feeling better.
I'm fine.
Take it as an order then, Doctor. The crew isn't going anywhere. And neither is Rukia.
And when back to Number 1 coming in, what I've really appreciated over the course of the season is that Number 1's character, you've seen multiple dimensions of her. She has different sides of her, and she's not a one-dimensional character. I was kind of worried at first that she would just be this hard ass, but now, now we're seeing more, and I can see her role on the ship.
Yeah, I can too. I would like to see in future episodes, maybe next season, more of her. We've got several, if not many seasons to bring her out. I'd like them to give her even more depth, more things to conquer. I'm not sure yet they've really given her anything juicy, except for when she was dealing with La'an and they went out on the bow of the Enterprise and saw the the Scour Square there, and that was kind of a nice moment for her. But
yeah,
I
that
think
was a
needs
nice
more.
moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely there was a nice moment, and her backstory of her hiding the fact that she's an Illyrian. So it was a good start, and you've seen her also as a counselor to Pike.
Yeah.
And so you've seen her in a nurturing role because she was nurturing to Pike, and she's been nurturing to Dr. Mbenga.
I can get used to this. No battles, no chaos, just scanning a nebula and focusing on the science.
Captain, you have repeatedly told me that humans have a superstition against calling attention to good things by saying them out loud.
So back on the bridge, it's time to get out of there. There's some cute banter with Spock. Ortegas is like, okay, I'm ready to go, Captain. And Pike is like, all right, let's get out of this nebula. But first he's saying, it's really nice just to sit here and stare at a nebula. Isn't this better than, getting chased and having gunfights and all the things that we've been going through? And it was kind of a cute moment for Pike. And it sets up, what happens to him later too.
We're not moving.
Mitchell, what's going on with my ship?
All systems are in the green, sir, but we're frozen in place.
They get ready to take off, and they can't take off. Something's blocking them, something in the nebula, they think is interfering with the warp static field or something to that, that nature. And but then they speak with Chief Hemmer, and it's like, okay, well, we'll just go to impulse power. Impulse power our way out. And then when they go to do that, Ortegas is knocked out.
Ortegas, get us out of here.
Bridge to Dr. Mbenga. Emergency. Lieutenant Ortegas is injured.
So, again, kind of a left turn here. They kind of get trapped. They can't go anywhere. Ortegas falls down. And we cut to the voice of Pike, calling Mbenga to come up. And he's kind of in a weird zone. He's teetering and tottering. The camera's tilted a little. And we're thinking, the stuff that he inhaled maybe is affecting him. And we cut to Mbenga. He's in sick bay, and he kind of looks dazed, and the camera's tilted a little bit, and he's kind of teetering. And you think, okay, this is gonna do something.
All hail the king!
What the hell?
And by the time he gets to the bridge, it's like you get some kind of confirmation that, obviously that something's happened. And so this is the moment that I was just like,
I know. I think we were all kind of dreading.
I was dreading it.
I thought too, one of the things I don't like about medieval anything, to be honest, is that little pan flute. Like that makes me crazy. And luckily, it didn't look like they put that. They didn't have that music in there. I was so grateful. If they had that, I don't know what I was gonna do.
I came to see Ortegas, but...
Ortegas. You mean Sir Adia?
Come. Sir Adia, from the book.
He enters the bridge, and he's in full, regalia.
Yes, and I thought I was at a Ren Fair. I was just like, oh no, we're at Ren Fair. Now, granted, I have been to a Ren Fair. I've had coworkers that participated in a Ren Fair, and I've enjoyed it, but not in my sci-fi because because I mean, I was just like, oh my God, this is so many of the episodes of the original series when we had to go that route, and I was just like, I have to admit, I was taken out of it for a moment because here we are with some of the performances.
Is this some kind of a joke, Captain?
If it is jokes you desire, I could summon the court jester.
Summon the court jester. Hold the jester.
Going this route, this is different. This episode using this vehicle, it's different from the episode Spock Amok, where humor was applied in a real world sense. But now we're taking a step further and we're going fairy tale land. And so I was just I had to push my way through these steps because what was happening was now we're seeing the actors playing. We're seeing the actors that play these characters actually stretch themselves a little bit further. And everybody couldn't do it. Some people did it better than others.
Perhaps your highness is parched. A sip of wine would refresh you.
It is my sworn duty to tend to the king's well-being. He shall drink nothing I have not tasted first.
Totally agree.
Yeah, this interrupted me enjoying it until much later.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you. I think you had to kind of get through the first half to really appreciate the second half. But I'll tell you, it didn't lose me as much as I thought it was going to. And I was pleasantly surprised by a couple of things. I thought Pike, being the coward, I thought he played that well and continued to play that well throughout the episode.
Oh, yeah, that I'll agree, because I made notations as to who took me out. Ortega's performance, the actress playing Ortega, she does well as Ortega, but it took me out when she was doing it. I think Pike, his expressions, I did enjoy that.
His little quips,
His little quips. So Anson Mount did a great job of pulling himself beyond Pike to play this other fairy tale character, and I did enjoy his performance. So I wanted to make those kind of notations because some things pull me in, some things pull me out. So I was being pulled in and out.
Yeah.
And of course, Dr. Mbenga, because he's playing it straight, was just fine. He's like, what the hell's going on here?
He's Alice in Wonderland in this. And the biggest thing that happens is he goes, look, I'm going to split right now. I'm going to go back down to sick bay. And I'm going to see what's going on. He gets down there, and the first person he encounters, of course, is Chapel.
It is wonderful to see you, King Ridley. What brings you to my sanctuary?
She's like full girl now. She's like in this huge dress, and she's got her hair up, and she's lovely.
Oh, yeah. And I was actually cracking up on her performance because she nailed it. Jess Bush did.
And what does your device say of me?
It seems your dopamine levels are highly elevated.
Dopamine.
It just kind of like, what are you doing? What is that? You know? And so I have to admit, that was the first time I actually laughed, was just at her just being kind of like, okay.
Yeah. Right.
And so it actually worked.
My dear, brave King Ridley, I'm so grateful to have finally found you.
But and then La'an comes in there, and it was nice to see La'an in a different, not being a hard ass.
I will tell you, she stole the show for me. And I have been critical of two of our characters, how Ethan is playing Spock and how La'an has kind of been a one-note person. And I think she just absolutely stole the show.
Queen Nev has invaded my kingdom. She's obsessed with the Mercury Stone. She thinks I have it.
Yes, and so Christina Chong, who plays La'an, got the opportunity to actually stretch her legs, and I did appreciate that. It was just like, oh, okay, so she can smile.
Yeah, well, not only that, but she flitters, and she's wearing this really adorable dress, and it's squeezing her boobs together, and she's just like, and she's got the dog in her arms, and it was I almost didn't recognize her, but I even thought they didn't use enough of her. I thought she was really good. Princess Talia is what she was called.
Let me go! I'll have you court-martialed!
Silence! Did you think your crimes would go unpunished, wizard?
I'm not a wizard. I'm the chief engineer.
Then all of a sudden we hear somebody being, screaming out, and it's Hemmer. He's been drugged through the hallway.
It doesn't sound right for the fairy tale. It's more like a Star Trek thing.
Right, and it was an immediate tip-off that he was unaffected by whatever was affecting the rest of the crew. Because clearly the doctor hasn't been affected, so now we have somebody else that isn't affected as well. And so he was being carted off by the guard for the Queen.
Hammer! Dr. Mbenga, please help me. Everyone else has lost their mind.
Yeah, and I was happy to see Hemmer because we haven't seen him for a while. And as I mentioned, I did some research on the actor who plays him, and he's just such an eclectic guy and so fascinating. I wanted to see more of him. And he seemed to kind of come out of his shell in this episode too.
Yes, I would say Hemmer was actually the secondary character in this. Or third, I guess, behind Ortega's, because she was all the way through it. But it was nice to see Hemmer and see a different side of him, because it seemed like Hemmer was, in ways, actually having fun throughout this episode as they were trying to solve this issue.
Right. So for folks who didn't watch this and are listening to us for the recap, what's happening now is that, of course, Dr. Mbenga is trying to get out of this fantasy world. He knows it's not real, and he has found that the ship is still intact. The humans are actually human. It's not a fantasy. And Hemmer has not been affected, but the guards are looking for something. And he needs to find out what that is. And he's thinking, maybe if we can find out what they're looking for, we can solve this and get out of here. But before he can do that and connect with Hemmer, they take Hemmer and they throw him, into the dungeon.
Yes, and they want the Mercury Stone, this mysterious
That's what they're
Mercury
looking
Stone.
for. Yep.
Yes.
And the person who's looking for it is someone named Queen Nev. Now, we don't know who that is yet. We don't know where that name came from, except for the book. But we need to find out who Queen Nev is and why she wants this Mercury Stone and what is it.
Queen Nev will be keeping Wizardcaster here, in the deepest part of her dungeon, at the center of her realm, surrounded by her most powerful forces and weapons.
So the doctor gets with Pike, who's playing whatever his character's name is,
right?
And they're strategizing on how to get Hemmer back. We're going to do diplomacy. We're going to do brute force. And
Pike's like, I like diplomacy. That's me.
Yes, and Ortegas is ready to go in, pull out her sword, and start.
She's named her sword.
Everyone. Yes. So I was just like, oh my gosh. So she slowly started growing on me, with her insistence on wanting to fight at every turn.
For real.
So they go with diplomacy, and they decided to take this basically this Wizard of Oz quest to go get Hemmer back, and then along the way they bump into Spock, who's Pollux the Wizard.
We're like, okay, who's Queen Nev? Let's find this out. We turn a corner as Pike and M'Benga and the crew finally come upon Queen Nev.
Welcome to my kingdom. Now, kneel before me.
Yes, of course.
And it's, of course,
Uhura.
Cadet Uhura, right. And she looks great. And I like her performance. I think it was really good. I think she played a queen really well.
Yes, and she wants that Mercury Stone.
Where is the Mercury Stone?
Could be anywhere, really.
Let my torturers drag its location out of you then.
Right. So she's like, okay, you kids are going in the dungeon. And Pike's kind of grateful for that because he doesn't want to be killed. So cut to down in the dungeon. There's really no B story here. There's just this through line. I think that's what's different with this episode than what we've seen is this is a one note story. We're just following one, a crusade throughout the whole thing. I mean,
this Lord of the Rings quest.
Yes. And M'Benga's in almost every scene. So he had a big deal this week.
Hemmer, am I glad to see you?
Are we the only two crew members who are unaffected?
It would appear so.
But they're down in the dungeon, and what's funny is that M'Benga is talking to Hemmer like two crewmates, and the other two are sitting in the background just kind of watching them talk and not really realizing that, they're talking about something different. And occasionally Ortegas, butts in like, what are you saying?
Yes, they're basically speaking a foreign language between the two, and they're talking talk and strategy, and these other people are taking up words and like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And, this is a running joke.
And it's time for a new twist, and this one is not a big twist, but it's important to the story, and that is Hemmer reveals to M'Benga that at the time of the jolt and the power surge on the Enterprise, he felt a consciousness, almost a telepathy, trying to get into him, and he kept it out, which is a little bit shades of Una keeping out that force in episode 3, was it? Where she fought that off.
2 or 3, where she fought off the illness.
Right.
But he's able to because he's telepathic. So we've already established that he has these extra sensory abilities.
Yeah, those little things on his head, obviously have something to do with that. But after a couple more little cute, humorous moments with Ortegas, he just produces a little tool that says, I'm going to cut through this. Everyone cover your eyes. And they go, why aren't you covering...
Every engineer walks around with a tool.
Of course, that's true. And he goes, cover your eyes. And they go, why aren't you covering yours? And I thought he was going to say, because I'm blind. But he goes, because I'm a wizard, which was so. Now I'm starting yeah, exactly. Now I'm starting to like it a little bit more. I'm starting to warm up to it.
Yes, I wondered his performance because I was just so happy to see him not be so serious.
Yeah, and I like him serious, but yeah, this was kind of fun, and it's interesting how he warms up to Mbenga, who reveals to him that it's his daughter, and he's like, we're gonna help you. Don't worry, we're gonna find you. And suddenly he's this empathetic creature, and I think because of maybe his telekinesis, he's able to maybe feel Mbenga's pain.
Maybe so. I mean, we don't fully understand all of his abilities, but we got a chance to see him funny. We got a chance to see him
wild.
Yeah, wilding out a little bit.
Unpredictable,
and he played into it. So I welcome that.
Once inside, I can block the door. That should give us time to access the ship's scanner array.
So now they're out and they're all headed to engineering.
Right, and suddenly, of course, they run into everyone again, and they're trapped again. And so another cute little fight.
I have armed myself.
Ortegas finally gets her sword fight.
Yeah, she gets her sword fight. I'm always fascinated by people who they have a sword in their hand, but they use the butt of it to hit them. I just use the pointy end, put it right in the person. That's what I do. That's the point of a sword.
Why waste time with this?
Why waste time? Yeah, because you need a fight scene.
You gotta have a fight scene, and this is also the same week over on the Star Wars side of things that there was a battle ensued with lightsaber play. So I think the Star Wars, Star Trek universes went head to head with their sword fights this week.
Yeah, I'll always go Trek first, but I am a fan of Star Wars.
This isn't over.
Yes, it is.
What's happening? Who's this?
Zymira the Huntress. She's an ally.
Una shows up. Okay, Deus Ex Machina. At the last second, she's hooded, kind of like Green Arrow. And
Robin Hood. Yeah, just pops in, starts shooting people with arrows.
And Huntress from DC, right? And she's like, I'm Zymira the Huntress. And it's like, okay, now it's getting a little weird again. But okay, let's just keep rolling with it because they needed that to bring her in.
Yes.
When I scan the nebula, I find evidence of a single life form, including brain activity, and yet there is no sign of a physical body.
Now we get a chance to let Hammer really do the real work. He's going to scan, and he scans a consciousness in the nebula.
Yes.
And he goes, have you ever heard of Boltzmann's brain?
A Boltzmann brain is a theoretical, spontaneously generated consciousness. And maybe we have just encountered one.
Yes, spontaneously generated consciousness. And I just thought, okay, this is new for me.
I didn't look this up. Is that a real thing? Is that because they seem to, in Star Trek Next Generation, when they ran across the Dyson sphere in the episode Relics with Scotty, that was a real theory by a real guy named Freeman Dyson. So I'm wondering, I have to look this up. Is there a Boltzmann brain of a spontaneous consciousness?
Yes, it is. Yes, I'm looking at Wikipedia as we speak, and the Boltzmann brain thought experiment suggests that it might be more likely for a single brain to spontaneously form in a void.
Wow! So just a brain forms. Well, that's weird. I gotta read that more. So wow, they really reached out for that one. I think that's great.
Hold on a second. Something's wrong here. This is not how the story goes. The two of you, Adia, Zymira, you don't even know each other.
There's a little bit more play going on because they realize that the story's changed a little bit because Una and Ortegas say they know each other very well, wink, wink, but in the story they're not supposed to. And I think that's where they're like, well, what if we hurt the king? Maybe that'll help. And it's just they start thinking, how can we fix this? And now they're kind of involved in the problem, which I think is interesting.
And because Ortegas and Number One's characters know each other, and they don't in the book, this is the first time that the Doctor realizes that there's some changes at play. Yeah. And there's a flaw in their story. And so ding, 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 there's a connection. Rakia is the connection, is the connection. And he realizes that in that moment because she did not like the ending of the story and she wanted it changed. And so that was the big tip off. That the entity took the story from his daughter, not
right. And that seed was planted early on when she said she wanted to change it.
Where is Rakia?
She's gone.
But now Mbenga can't summon her. I think this is a good plot twist. He doesn't know where she is.
Right, and this is where I'm now fully sucked back in because I'm like, oh my God, he's lost his daughter. She's not in the pattern buffer when they go back down to sickbay, and so you see on his face that despair. And here we go once again. I'm being drawn in as a dad, and feeling his pain because you could see it all in his face. I mean, I would panic not to have my daughter. I mean, my son rather.
Right. Because he's always known where she was. He's always known that, even though she's sick, he knows she's safe there in that pattern buffer. And when they start to put two and two together and they realize, hey, listen, this story's being influenced by her, but she's missing. I start thinking, is she the entity? Is something going on? Have we stepped into a fourth dimension? Weird, right? But
it's great. It's great because now we have questions as viewers. I'm sitting here questioning now. I'm invested now. I want to find out. So we realize that she's actually the Mercury Stone.
Yeah, and that's found out because Spock's listening, or rather Pollux is listening in. We realize that that's what they're trying to look for. And, of course, Spock takes that back to Uhura / Queen Nev. And, now it's time to, to pay or play in a sense. They throw Pike down in front of Nev, and she's like, so, do you want to die or do you want to live? Do you want to serve me? What do you want to do?
No. I'm too young to die. Oh. Please, I beg you.
We've already picked up from the very beginning that he's probably self-serving. It's always going to be about him protecting himself, and so he takes the knee.
Which to me makes me worried a little because I feel like this season Pike has really been chill, and I don't want to think that Pike's worst instincts are to be cowardly. I would hope that it's just the character. But in the beginning, he's like, isn't this better than just fighting all the time? It's just staring at stuff. So maybe that was just kind of the nod to that. I'm not sure. I'm just worried. I don't want Pike to be too diluted. I want him to be a tough guy when he needs to be.
Right. And, maybe that's going to come in the 2 ending episodes because
let's hope so.
End of the season. He's got to step up. There's got to be something big coming.
The quarters are down here. Uki always said she wanted to see them.
Your Majesty, I am so glad to see you alive and safe.
No thanks to your cowardice.
Mbenga and Hemmer are free. The rest of the crew's free. Pike's on the dark side, but they're going to go and find his daughter, who is the Mercury Stone. And they're in the corridor, and who do they run into, Anthony?
Queen Nev, the betrayal, the traitor Pike, and Spock.
Right. And, who is Pollux, who, again, didn't really have a big part in this. You would think he would have maybe fought Ortegas or Hammer, maybe, because they're supposed to be brothers.
Yeah, maybe he's tired from last week's pinch fight that he had on the bridge.
Yeah, they're like, Spock, step back. So there they are. It's kind of a standoff. And, well, who makes it funny, and this is really funny, is Hemmer steps up, and he plays the part of the wizard just brilliantly.
What are you doing?
Abracadabra!
And I loved it. It actually worked for me. Where other things didn't, this one actually, his his portrayal of the wizard, actually worked for me. And so he abracadabras himself, and I didn't know what he was going to do. Actually, I was like, okay, so well, how's he going to get us out of? Yeah, how are we going to get out of this?
Yeah, and he's moving his fingers around, and even Mbenga's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Don't worry, I got this." And he points a couple times, and then he just pops open a communicator
and beams him out of the corridor.
Yeah, he takes his magical spinny finger, presses one button, but he says to them, if you don't step back, I'm going to transport you to the dark, evil place. Like, he threatens them. And even Pollux, who's played by Spock, says, don't listen to him, he's lying. And he goes, oh, am I? And then that's when he does the whole thing. Woo! He presses the communicator, and what does he do? He transports them magically to Cargo Bay 12, which is probably just as bad as the evil dungeon. But there we go, right? So now Mbenga is free to find Rukia, and he enters his quarters, and there she is.
Right, because he remembered that in their conversation at the beginning, she said that, she wanted to see his quarters, and he said, one day you will. And lo and behold, that's exactly where she was.
Daddy, you made it.
Right, she's dressed in a beautiful princess-type gown. She's lovely. Her hair's different. And, she's so happy to see him, and he's so happy to see her. And he says he scans her.
Right. He scans her, and she's free of illness. I mean, I'm like, oh, my goodness. Okay, how did this happen? And she says, my friend made me better.
A friend?
She woke me up when we've been playing. I could see you, Daddy. You did such a good job. Did you have fun?
I did. But it's time to stop playing. Can we put everything back the way it was?
And so now immediately we know, okay, that's the nebula, that's the entity. And my mind starts spinning because we've seen this episode before. The nebula becomes friends with the child, but the nebula has ulterior motives and uses the child and the child's curiosity and naivete to get access to whatever.
Exactly. These entities befriend children because they're so vulnerable and innocent,
gullible,
gullible, the whole kit caboodle. And so you're left with, okay, well, is another shoe going to drop?
Yeah, and that's when Mbenga says, "Listen, who's this friend?" He knows it's the entity. But he's curious as to how she's cured, and is it going to last? Is it going to stick?
Okay. Can I talk to your friend?
It doesn't really work that way.
Perhaps I can be of some assistance.
So Hammer, sensing that he needs to step in because he's had this connection before, enters. And he says, I'm going to go ahead and attempt to connect with the entity. I love it before Hammer connects with the entity. He's like, just please be gentle. Right? So, yes. And then he gets, infiltrated. And the entity speaks through Hammer.
You must not take the child.
I need you to stop this fantasy. You're putting my crew in danger.
The needs of your crew are inconsequential. You must protect the child.
This entity has basically taken his daughter's physically, but primarily her consciousness.
When I probed your ship, I felt her imprisoned in your machine. I sensed her loneliness. It matched my own.
All it really wants is the child. It's a really kind of a lovely gesture. It's not a weird, creepy gesture. It doesn't want to take over anything. It wants to take Rukia and give her a life that the doctor can't.
Right. And the entity is lonely. So it's a little bit self-serving as well. The entity senses that the daughter's lonely because she is lonely. She has this very lonely existence. And here you have this consciousness, this entity is lonely as well. And so they've, struck up a friendship.
Yeah. And it's a great echo from the beginning of the story where the king has to make a choice. Now, this is where I'm going to deviate from my appreciation of this particular story. I had the same problem I had with Interstellar, which I thought was a great movie, but I have two daughters, And if I were Matthew McConaughey, I never would have left the planet and left my kid alone. Now, I know it was vital to the story, but I'm not about to leave my 9-year-old alone while I go off into space. I either take her with me or I stay and die with her.
If I leave, the child will die. You must make a choice. The crew or your daughter.
In this case, too, he's given a choice. Keep his daughter, keep her in the pattern buffer and slowly watch her die and give her no life at all. Or actually let her go with this entity, who, by the way, he doesn't know from Adam. He doesn't know anything about this entity, who this daughter has named Deborah.
His late wife.
His late wife is her late mother. And he's got to make a choice. Now, my choice would have been, you're staying with me until I find a cure. I'm not going to let you go. But it's up to M'Benga.
Remember I told you you could write your own story someday. But it's up to you.
I want to.
Okay, brave girl.
I love you, Daddy.
But his daughter also pleaded with him.
Well, she not only pleads with him, he says, ultimately, I'm going to let you make the choice, Rokia. He lets his daughter make the choice because he knows, the entity is saying she'll be happy and healthy and safe here. She'll never know pain or death or anything like that.
Right. She'll never die.
She'll never die. And so he lets her make the choice. And the daughter says, I want to go. Now, I also find that just hard to believe. She asks kind of innocently, Dad, can you go with me? He's like, no, I can't. And then she's like, okay, I'm going to go. And I don't know. I guess maybe because she's constantly tired of being put in the pattern buffer and brought out and the dumb stories over and over again, maybe she does want this adventure. And I guess maybe it does make sense. But to me, I can't imagine a father-daughter splitting up like that. I don't know. I didn't see it.
No, it's a good question. But, I mean, if he's been doing this for years with her, and you get the impression that it has been years, and every time he pulls her out, she's moving closer and closer to death. There's no guarantee. Yeah. There's no guarantee that he could ever save her. But here is an opportunity at eternal life for her.
Yeah, and again, my thinking when I was watching it was, well, wait a second. They're on the Enterprise, and they're exploring strange new worlds. You're telling me they're not going to come across a cure soon, eventually, somewhere? They came close 3 episodes ago. So I'm screaming at the TV for this,
Yeah, but you're thinking of it as 3 episodes ago. This is Enterprise, blah, blah, blah. You got to take yourself out of that and plop yourself in it.
I know. And I was too close to it. So she decides to go. It is a lovely moment. I can see why he did let her go.
Yeah. This was the best part of the episode for me. I mean, it actually touched me in a way, and it was
touching.
Hello, Daddy. Thank you for everything. You were right. I've been creating my own adventures.
Surprise, surprise. She goes away, and within 5 seconds, her spirit comes back into the quarters and rematerializes as a young woman. She's now probably 10 years older.
Yeah, what was moments for you was years. What was moments for you were years.
Dad,
were years for me. And she's explored the galaxy and traveled all around with the entity and everything. And she's learned so much. And so, he gets a chance to see, that she's living, for lack of a better word, her best life.
I'm happy. I'm safe. You did the right thing. Someday we'll see each other again. I know we will. But you have to live your own life now.
Yeah, right. And you wonder if she's going to become a traveler like Wesley Crusher.
All of a sudden, Wesley appears. Who the hell are you?
Yeah, it's like, hey, nerds, what's up?
Hey, nerds.
Hey, nerds.
Excuse me. I'm laughing so much. I'm coughing here. That would have been hilarious. Wesley Crusher.
Hey,
appears.
nerds, do you guys want to be on my show?
I love this show. You want to be on my podcast?
No, he does a really good show, The Ready Room.
Yeah, he does. He does, actually. He's really, really good at it.
Chief Medical Officer's personal log. Supplemental. None of the crew remember what happened.
So things go back to normal. Hammer wakes up and of course has no memory. And frankly, no one does. No one remembers the missing 5 hours that took place.
Joseph? Rukia?
She's fine. She's alive. She's safe.
Number one, goes to talk to the doctor. He says, "I've experienced something, really amazing," and then she's like, "Yeah, there are 5 hours missing in the logs."
Yeah, and she goes, "You know what they were?" And he says, "I do. It's quite a story," which
bookends
starts like
the whole
any good
thing.
story.
Yeah, it bookends the whole thing. Yeah,
yeah. It just was not as icky and what am I thinking of? Winch crenching as I thought it might be. It had a heart. It had a soul. It was pretty good.
Yes, and that if they had carried on like that any longer, it would ruin the whole thing. But there was a point. I mean, honestly, I feel like they could have used a better vehicle than the Fantasyland, Candyland, whatever this was. I think that part of it was a fail for me.
You think about. I agree. I don't like Kirk. Was Caesar, and you think about the episode "Fistful of Datas," where they're in a western town. Star Trek has always put their characters in strange situations with silly, wardrobe. And I think it's unavoidable. And I also think, we've been so spoiled by the first 7 episodes because they have been flawless, that there's fans out there that really love this kind of fantasy stuff. They love the role play and the wardrobe and the medieval knights and all of that. And so this is a tip of the hat to them as well. And
and Star Trek is a big tent, and I can appreciate that. I can't, every episode can't be the same style, or you burn out anyway. So it was fine. I mean, it wasn't necessarily my forte, but it ended in a way that was moving and touching to me. And then at the end of the day, that was the whole point, and that's what made it, good for me.
Right. Well, okay, so it ended well, and now Dr. M'Benga moves on and becomes a more functional member of the crew. And Anthony, I think if you're okay with this, we can count down our top 3 moments of this episode.
No. I'm too young to die. Oh. Please, I beg you, spare me.
Okay, I'll start with my number 3. I got to say it was Pike's performance, Anson Mount's performance. I just, even though I didn't really love that he was a coward, I love the way he played it. His little asides here and there were great. And I just really enjoyed it. Even though I didn't think I wanted to enjoy it, I did.
Abra! Cadabra!
For me, it was Hemmer. I really enjoyed seeing a different side of him. Another layer to this character. So that really worked for me. I was just like, okay, all right then. I appreciate that. And his jokes were on point.
Her Crimson Guard captured my throne and imprisoned my subjects. I mean, I scarcely escaped with my life, not to mention my poor little Wunda.
My number 2 was La'an, being the crazy princess with the dog. She just chewed up the scenery and sucked up the oxygen, and as far as I'm concerned, stole the show. She was great. I was so pleased to see that actress do what she did and to play that character that way. I loved it.
I will give that a second on that. I'll second your number 2.
You'll second my second?
I'll second your second, number 1. No, just kidding.
What'd you like about it?
No, it was just again refreshing to see her play it a little loose and have fun with it. And she still reminds me of Drummer from The Expanse. I don't know if you were an Expanse fan, but
I wasn't. I have not seen Expanse.
Just look up the character Drummer. It's another Asian actress. They almost look like they're related. Like Drummer could be her mother.
Remember I told you you could write your own story someday. But it's up to you.
I want to.
Okay, brave girl.
I love you, Daddy.
My number one this week was the relationship between M'Benga and his daughter, and the full circle that it came, not only in this episode, but in what we know about them. And for him to let him go, even though I didn't agree with it, even though I didn't like it, I really felt it, and I really appreciated that whole story. That was my number one.
Well, I can't deviate from that because I've said it from the very beginning. It ended in a way that moved me, and I was almost brought to tears because I just put myself in that same situation. Could I let go of my son and let him go for his benefit? And so, like you said, the story came full circle. They paid it off. So the writers did a great job of carrying an arc throughout the entire season that ended in a very, very good way. Here's a sneak peek at next week's episode of Strange New Worlds, Episode 9, All Those Who Wander.
Sorry. That for Lieutenant Duke?
No, I didn't realize you were so jumpy.
Here's what I like about what they're doing with the preview of next week. They're totally stealing from the Marvel end of the credits extra scene idea. It's just a minute and a half of one scene that is very mysterious and cryptic, and you don't really know what's going on. In this one, this week, it's Spock. He's looking for something. He hears a strange noise, and he sees a hole, presumably in the bulkhead.
Yes, but there's a trail of blood on the ground, streaks of blood. And I was like, okay, are the Gorn back? Or, is this round 2 of the Gorn? Because remember in that particular episode, there was trails of blood on the ground as if people had been dragged.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in this one, but with the title, All Those Who Wander, is this what happens to all those people who wander off the beaten path? They get taken and beat up and drug off and there's a blood trail? I don't know.
Maybe.
So, yeah, but it's spooky, it's intense. So I do get the impression that these last 2 episodes are going to be full throttle. It's going to be probably action-packed, probably intense, with high stakes.
Yeah, you're right. It's dark, and it may be a 2-parter. You're right. I think that could be it. If I know that they're doing episodic, but it does make sense. And if they're going to make the Gorn kind of like this season's Borg, then I think they're on the right track.
Well, we will see. We will see. So 2 episodes left. The season's almost over.
Oh my God.
It's been fun. It's been a fun ride, and they've come in the right way. So I'm ready to see how they're going to finish.
Me too. And we're not going to be done. After this season is done, we'll be coming back with other Star Trek shows, which we'll announce on our last episode 2 weeks from now.
Exactly. Well, that's it for this episode of Energize. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm Anthony McLemore.
I'm Steve Truitt. Live long and prosper.